Hi friends, Lisa Laker here. I am back today painting another beautiful winter scene. I thought if it's going to be ugly outside, we could at least pull the pretty parts of the outdoors inside and enjoy it that way. This one I have pre-printed a verse on it, and again I take my paper to our local printer because it jams in my printer, and their copy machines are just built to carry or to print on any paper thickness. I use Arches paper, which is a little bit thicker than what you get in the notebook. So I've got a verse printed on one of God's beautiful promises, and then we're going to do 3 layers of trees today, and then add some snow. So we're going to start with some mastic, and this has one of the pointed tips on it, and what it does is prevents the color from penetrating the paper wherever you have this. So I always test it because it can come out pretty big, but you just want some really small little dots. And so we're going to go ahead and fill, see the bubbles happen, and that's okay because we're gonna add more snow at the very end with the ink like I showed you in previous videos. So let's go ahead and fill our paper with all kinds of little snow dots, and then we're going to let that dry. So the trick to using this is keeping the perfect amount of pressure on the bottle as you're dropping it down. Like don't start squeezing more or less, just keep that pressure, and then once the mastic is out of that tip, then add just a little bit more. And it does come out sometimes in bubbles like you see there, or big blobs, and after this dries we can clean some of those up. Now I love the snow as long as I don't have to be out in it, so for me the more snow the better. Again, we're going to add some more when we're done, so if you don't have this much or you're leery about putting this much on there, then just stop and we'll fill the rest in at the very end of the painting. Okay, so I've let this dry, and you know it's dry because it turns a little bit yellow, and if you put your hand down on it, nothing comes up. And then these big blobs that you may not want, all you have to do is rub those, and then they pill up, and you can pull them right off your paper. You can also use an eraser. I'm going to leave the other ones because I don't mind the different size blobs. Okay, we're going to use 3 different colors today: indigo, perlene green, and manganese blue. And I've used these in the previous paintings as well. So we're going to do 3 layers, as I said. So I'm going to start by wetting my paper, and I'm going to go down about halfway. And this is going to be for the first background of trees, and we're going to do this, and actually we're going to do the sky first, and then we're going to add the first background of trees. Now I've done this painting also in I used aqua, and then I used a little bit of purple in the snow, and it turned out really pretty too. If I can find a copy of that, I'll post that in the links or on my website so you can see different ways to be creative with the color. But now I'm going to go ahead with the manganese blue and mix a little puddle into my palette here. And if you squeegee the side of your brush off, you get more of that water out of it. And then I'm going to test it on my little paper here. That's about the color I want. So I'm going to go ahead and wash that throughout the sky. And skies are never perfect, so this doesn't have to be perfect. You can leave some areas of dark, you can leave some white spots. And then since the paper's wet, this is going to dry a little bit lighter. So right now, if you want the sky to be a little bit darker like I do, I'm going to add more color right into it. And since I'm out here, I'm just going to stick my brush right in there mix it into my brush, a little bit darker. And then I'm just going to add different spots so that there's a lot of variation in the sky. And if you just pick up your brush and drop it, it gives you that really loose watercolor look that I have tend to be drawn more to. And I like a lot of contrast, lots of lights, lots of darks. Just my style. No right or wrong answer. Okay, and I'm going to leave it just like that. And now that first background of trees, I'm going to mix more of the same blue. And we're going to start with quite a bit of this because we're going to work off of this same puddle throughout the rest of the painting. So add a little bit more water. And I let all my paints dry on my palette, so that's why I'm digging into it. If you just put some color onto it, you obviously will not have to wet and manipulate it as much. And now I'm going to add just a little bit of indigo, just to darken it a little bit darker than the sky. That might be too dark, so I'm going to add some more of the manganese blue or manganese blue. Okay, and now I'm going to add just a little bit more water. Okay. And test it again. Yeah, I like the variation there. Okay, so to do trees, I start at the peak and I'm going to be just about an inch off of the top of the page. And I'm literally just drew a line and now I'm dotting in, and that's about as far as I'm going to go because we're going to cover it. Then I'm going to get some more paint. So these are supposed to be the very background, which would be pretty blurred anyway, so we don't need to be too detailed, which is why I did not let that paper dry. And we can go higher in some areas. Do a tall one here. And we'll do a little shorty here. And some of these are going to be covered, so you don't, again, don't be real finicky about having it detailed. Let's do one more tall one up here. Okay, and that's our first layer there. I want the peaks to be just a little bit more pronounced, so I'm literally just with the very tip of my brush dropping in some paint. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to let that dry. And now I'm going in with the second layer, which I'm pretty much mimicking the same patterns that I did before, only we're going to go just a little bit lower. Oh, and I meant to add a little bit of green to our mix now. So we want the colors to slightly change as we go. There we go. See where the paper's wet is where that paint went. So you don't have to fret about making a new tree or staying in the lines, because the paint always gravitates to where the water is. And way up. And then just kind of brush them together here. Again, there's no most of this is going to be covered, so it's really just background color that we're adding. And if you want to get up and do just a couple more really fine details, lower your brush very slowly. And then you can add a few little twigs off of some of these branches. Again, it's kind of ridiculous to get too detailed at this point because, again, we're going to go over it with another layer or another color of paint for the trees that are closest to us. Okay, now we're going to let that dry. And I did add another little tree because I noticed the trees were kind of far apart here and it looked like a big blob. So I added another small tree here, and then I carried some of that water up the sides here. Now with the same puddle, and I barely have any left, I'm gonna mix, throw some more water in here, mainly green this time. And this green is kind of a grayed down or very neutral blue-green anyway. So we don't need to add too much blue, but I'm just gonna brush against the indigo once, and then I'm gonna add just a little bit more water here. Probably a little more green. And yep. Okay, now this is where we're gonna make the most detailed trees. So I'm going to start one right in here, and again the tip of my brush just to start those top branches there, and the little needles coming off, and then the further down I get, the more I lay my brush on its side, and eventually I don't really even watch what I'm doing. I think I put too much water in my paint. I'm going to add a little bit more green to it just to, there we go, just to thicken it up a little bit. And then toward the bottom, we don't, again, need to be real detailed because this is a very loose painting, and I'm going to stop right about in here. Now with this one, you can go off and get just a little bit more with the pine needles, and just with the tip of your brush, just drag it out and then carry some, or drag your brush just off of those branches a little bit. I'm going to go in to the right and do another tree here. This one I think I'll do a little bit shorter. And now I'm just putting more pressure, and then the further down I get, the more you can just kind of drag that paint around. And let the trees just blend into each other. Okay, and then the last one. Right in here. Start real light. And then bring it down to the same level as the other trees. Okay, now these are still wet, so I'm going to go back in with a little bit of a darker, just stick my brush right into the green and then mix it around just to saturate my brush with it. And then about midway down, just stipple. And stipple just means make dots up and down, because the darker and the closer to the trunk, the darker the tree actually is. That's where you're going to get all your shadows. This one's not been drying enough to pick up that color like the other two trees did. So we'll just keep working with it. Get underneath some of these branches. And you can see all that snow in there. And now rinse your brush really well. And we're going to go back in with that same blue that we used on the sky. And hopefully you have a little room on your palette. I'm mixing mine with a little bit of that green that's left from whatever I did last. And we're just going to wash across the bottom of the page. I like to do this very loosely. Now rinse my brush again, and then I blotted it a few times on my towel here and just drag some of that paint up and down. Now I'm going to add back in just a little bit more. Again, just for the texture, the variation, the contrast. And now the side of my brush, just make a little bit more, just back and forth, very loosely. And then I'm going to do the same. These trees are still wet. And we're going to do the same at the bottom of those trees, just so there's not a hard line. I'm going to mix a little bit more of that blue, and then just a corner of the green in with it that I've already been working with. And just drop that in the bottom, just for kind of a shadow. Up and down. And up and down, back and forth. Use all different sides of your brush. And now I'm going to drag down just a little bit in some spots. And it's okay to drag some of that color from the tree as well. And mix a little from the bottom. And this is where you can be really messy and really creative, or you can be really clean and really neat. You could even skip this step altogether. I just like the texture that it brings. Okay, now we're gonna let that dry, and we're gonna go back in with one more layer on our trees. Okay, so this time with the trees, we're gonna use just the pure Perlene green. I'm just gonna make it a little bit thicker in my palette. I'm not gonna add any more water. And we're doing the same concept. Straight down. Only we're not going to follow that tree perfectly. We're just adding the shadows and the depth. And on to the second. And the third. I'm trying to keep the third layer like on these real thin branches. I try to keep that color just underneath so that it looks like more of a shadow. Up here. Again, let some of that color run together. I'm going to add a little bit more to all three again. Mainly down the center. And then we'll let that dry. And then come back in and add that last layer of snow. And you can play with this and let it dry and add more layers until you get the darkness that you're after. So this can take as long or be as quick as you want. Okay, now that this is completely dry, we're going to go ahead and remove all that mastic. I'm just going to do it by using a pink eraser. And very lightly, don't push down on your paper too much. As you rub across, it will start to come off. Now, if your paint is laying on top of your paper, the eraser will pick up the paint and start smearing it. So if you notice that happening, I'm not sure what to do in that case, but just expect that your paper is going to be smeared a little bit. Or maybe try to use a blow dryer. I blow dry my paintings a lot. That way I don't have to wait for drying time. So maybe try to dry it a little bit more with a blow dryer. Now that most of it's removed, it will pick up itself. You just rub it with your fingers. In some areas. Now you'll know this is off because you'll stop feeling the texture when you drag your eraser, or they make a little tool for it. I don't know what it's called. I have one. I don't know where it is, but I haven't seen it in stores to know what it's actually called, so I don't use it very often. But you'll know when everything's off of it because you won't feel the texture when you're dragging your eraser across it. I've got some up here in the sky still. Okay, and now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add some ink to it. And this, I still use the same brush. Now the more ink, and the wetter the brush is, the bigger your blobs are going to be. So this is getting down pretty low. But I do advise you, if you've never done this before, to practice on a test sheet. But this is where you can get as much or different sizes, different placement of the snow as your heart desires. I'm going to cover my words here so that they don't get inked over. And I'm just hitting the brush on the side of my finger. And I'm going to call that good. And I'm also going to go ahead and add some of the light blue. I have very, very little bit left. Dab my brush a little. And a little bit of the green. Just because I like to have fun. And now the very last thing I do before I sign it is I take some of that and just add some more water and spread out a little bit. Again, just a little bit more texture to the page. Not necessary if you're happy with how it looks, but I really like my paintings to be a little bit looser. So for me, this is what makes my art mine. And same down here. Okay, now I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and sign it. And with that, I always use a small brush, but most of the people that I teach, they like to use a pen. So however you prefer. And I also like to blend my signature in with the background color. So I'm just going to go in with that same blue that I used at the very bottom, a little bit thicker, and I slowly lower my brush until it hits the paper. That way it's real light and real thin. And that's how I get my signatures to be very realistic with the paint. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.